Lesson 12, third declension, neuter nouns in men and us, imperfect indicative, first conjugation. Hello again and welcome back to Lenny's Latin class. Today we're on lesson 12, which is on page 39. In this lesson, we're going to examine neuter nouns of the third declension. And you can see at the bottom of the page here, there's a big chart. But before we do that, let's take a quick look at section 118. Section 118 is nothing new to you because I've talked about this extensively already. The authors of the book want to tell us two things in section 118. They want to tell us that when you learn a new noun, you need to make sure that you know the gender of the noun. Why? Because if it's neuter, it's going to have different endings. As I've said many times, a neuter noun, no matter what declension it's from, will have a nominative plural that ends with the letter A. And the nominative forms and accusative forms will be the same. Those are two important things to remember about neuter nouns. So whenever you learn a new noun, you really need to know what the gender of that noun is. Because if you don't know the gender, you cannot produce the various forms with the various endings. And the next thing they want to tell us here is about the genitive stem, which they call the base. It doesn't matter what you call it. You can call it the genitive stem or the base. Either way, it's the same thing. You're taking the genitive singular form of the noun, removing the ending, and what you're left with is a base or a stem to which you add the different endings of the noun. Okay, so that's what they're telling us in section 118. Again, those two things are nothing new. I've spoken to you about them many times. So let's move on now to section 119, and let's examine some model nouns, which are neuter nouns of the third declension. In the first column, we have the noun flumen, which means river. Let me point out to you the stem change between the nominative singular and genitive singular. In the nominative singular, we have F-L-U-M-E-N. In the genitive singular, that E is an I, so you get F-L-U-M-I-N, and the ending is I-S. So to find the genitive stem, we take the genitive singular form, fluminous, we chop off the I-S ending, and we're left with F-L-U-M-I-N. Okay, so in the genitive stem, you have an I near the end. In the nominative singular, you get an E near the end. They sound the same, flumen, but there's a spelling change. So now that we have the genitive stem, F-L-U-M-I-N, we can add the third declension endings and get forms like the dative singular flumini, ablative singular fluminae, and since this noun is neuter, notice that the nominative and accusative forms are the same. They are both flumen. Notice that the accusative singular has the letter E as the second to last letter, and that's not the same as the genitive stem because it's identical to the nominative singular. Very important to notice. In the plural forms, we have flumina as our nominative plural form. Notice the letter A is the ending there. For genitive plural of the rivers, that would be fluminum. Dative plural, fluminibus. Accusative plural, flumina. Notice that it's the same as the nominative plural. And ablative plural is fluminibus. Okay, so notice the stem change. Notice the nominative plural ending. And notice that the nominative and accusative forms are identical. Moving on to the next noun, tempus, another neuter noun. It means time. We have related English words like temporal and temporary. Here's another noun with a stem change. The nominative singular is tempus, but the genitive is temporis. And if we remove the is from temporis, we get the genitive stem, which is T-E-M-P-O-R. Now that we have the genitive stem, we can add on the endings and get forms like the dative singular tempori, ablative singular tempore. Notice that the accusative singular form tempus is identical to the nominative singular form. It does not follow the genitive stem. In the nominative plural, we get tempora, genitive plural temporum, dative plural temporibus, accusative plural tempora, and ablative plural temporibus. Moving on to the next noun, opus. That's a neuter noun meaning work, like something you make. We have related English words like opera, operation, operative. This is yet another neuter noun of the third declension. The nominative singular form is opus, O-P-U-S, and the genitive singular form is operis. Therefore, if we remove the is ending from operis, we get O-P-E-R. That means that O-P-E-R is the genitive stem. So we can tack on our endings to O-P-E-R and get forms like the dative singular operi, ablative singular opere, dative plural operibus, ablative plural operibus, and so on and so forth. Again, notice that the nominative and accusative forms are identical. And finally, in the last column to the right, we have just the bare endings for the third declension for a neuter noun. Make sure that you take time to memorize these endings so that you can recognize them when you see them, and also so that you can begin to use them in your spoken Latin exercises. Okay, time now to move on to section 120, and here we're going to examine the imperfect tense. Okay, up to this point, we have mostly been living in the present tense. In the last lesson, we learned a few imperfect tense verbs of being, like eram, eras, erat. Now we're going to delve into the imperfect tense even more and start to learn how to conjugate verbs in the imperfect tense. So let's turn the page to the top of page 40. In the second line, we have a sentence there that starts like this. The sign of the imperfect tense is BA. Okay, so we're going to take the letters B and A, and we're going to wedge them in right before the personal ending. Okay? In Latin, everything is about endings, endings, endings. We're always changing the endings of words. And so here, for the imperfect tense, we are putting in this, what you would call an infix. It's something that you squeeze in into the middle of a word. And you can see in section 121 what these different forms will look like after we squeeze in the B and the A. We'll get forms like laudabam, laudabas, laudabat, laudabamus, laudabatus, and laudabant. Okay, so we can see the letters B and A being squeezed in there. What exactly are they doing? What does it give us once they're there? In other words, what is the imperfect tense? Well, the imperfect tense shows us action that took place in the past, but action that was taking place continuously. Let me give you an example with the verb walk. If I say, I walked to the store, that's what you call the perfect tense. It shows action that is completed. We don't know how long the action took. All we know is that the action is completed. Again, that's called the perfect tense. Now, what we're studying in this particular lesson is the imperfect tense. Here's an example. I was walking to the store. Okay, in that example, I said I was walking, and what that tells us is that the action occurred over an extended period of time. The action took place in the past, but it was ongoing action. So in English, to say walk, in the imperfect tense, you might say, I was walking. To use the verb walk in the perfect tense, you could say, I walked. And the key here is the meaning of the word perfect. Okay, in our usual day-to-day conversations, we use the word perfect to mean something that has no flaws or blemishes. If I accidentally forget something and leave it at home, but my friend has an extra one that he can loan me, he might hand that thing to me and I'll say, "Oh, this is perfect. Thanks for loaning it to me." So we say perfect, meaning really, really good. It really hits the spot, or it has no flaws or no blemishes, okay? That's not what the term perfect means here when we're talking about verb tenses. When you're talking about verb tenses, the word perfect has to do with the completion of the action. And the word perfect actually comes from Latin, from the verb perficio, which means to thoroughly do something or thoroughly accomplish or finish something. The four principal parts are perficio, perficere, perfaci, perfectus. Okay, and again, the verb means to complete something, to finish something, to thoroughly do it. So in the original Latin sense of the word perfectus in Latin means finished, accomplished, done. Okay, so that Latin word perfectus, that's where we get our English word perfect from. So if I'm talking about a verb tense that is a perfect tense, that means that I'm talking about action that is completed, done, and finished. If I'm talking about a verb tense that is imperfect, the letters I and M on the front of the word serve as a negative. They negate the idea of perfect. So imperfect means not perfect in the sense of not finished, not accomplished, not done. So the perfect tense talks about action that is done and finished and accomplished. The imperfect tense, on the other hand, talks about action not in the sense of it being finished, but in the sense of it being ongoing, in the past. Okay, so when you think of the imperfect tense, think of ongoing action or continuous action in past time. So with that in mind, let's look at section 121, and we have some forms of the verb laudo here put into their imperfect tense forms. So laudabam would be I was praising. Laudabas would be you were praising. Laudabat, he, she, or it was praising. Laudabamus, we were praising. Laudabatus, y'all were praising. And laudabant, they were praising. Notice that in the first person singular, you don't have the letter O as your ending. Instead, you get the letter M. So that's a difference from the present tense. Instead of laudabao, you get laudabam. Okay, so that's the imperfect tense, continuous action in past time. If you move your eyes to the right, you'll see those same forms, but in their passive forms. Okay, so here we learn how to say, I was being praised. That's laudabar. Next, laudabaris is you were being praised. Laudabatur, he, she, or it was being praised. Laudabamur, we were being praised. Laudabamini, y'all were being praised. And laudabantur, they were being praised. So these are all the forms of the imperfect tense that we will learn in this particular lesson. A couple of lessons from now, we will continue to study the imperfect tense, and we'll look at the second, third, and fourth conjugations. But for now, try to master these first conjugation imperfect forms. Let's move on now to section 122, use of the imperfect tense. And in this section, they're just telling us a little bit more about the quality of the imperfect tense. That is, a bit more detail about what kinds of action it can talk about. So far, what I've said is that it's continuous action in past time, like I was walking or I was praising. So let's read it together. Use of the imperfect tense. The imperfect indicative, for now just ignore the word indicative. The imperfect indicative represents action as going on in past time. Caesar was praising, or Caesar praised his troops. Okay, That you already understand. I've already talked about it. But here's another thing. It says it may express repeated or customary action. And the example here is Caesar kept praising or used to praise. Okay, so if you see the word laudabat, that's imperfect tense, third person singular, it could mean he was praising, he kept praising, or he used to praise. I don't want to tell you to translate it as Caesar praised, because there's another tense that has that kind of flavor to it, which we're going to talk about in the future. With verbs of being, it's much more flexible. You'll see the imperfect used in all kinds of situations. And they have an example here. Flumen erat inter Belgas et Celtas. A river was between the Belgians and the Celts. So you get the idea. For now, just think of the imperfect tense as continuing action, ongoing action that happened in the past. If you think of it in those terms, that's good enough for now. And as you grow in your knowledge of the Latin language, you can continue to refine your understanding of the imperfect tense. Okay, let's move on to section 123 and look at our vocabulary for this lesson. First, we have annus anni, which means year. That's a masculine noun of the second declension. We have lots of related English words like annual. Also, the word millennium. The word mille, M-I-L-L-E, means 1,000. And if you put annus on the end of that, the A in annus goes away, and you get millennium, which means 1,000 years. Moving on, we have flumen, fluminous, a neuter noun of the third declension, which means river. A related English word would be flume. Next, we have nomen, nominous, another neuter noun of the third declension, which means name. Related English words would be words like nominate, nomenclature. Next, we have genus, generis, yet another neuter noun of the third declension, which means race or tribe. Lots of related English words like general, generic. Moving on, we have opus, operus, another neuter noun of the third declension, which means work or fortification. In English, we use this word to talk about musical compositions. A composer's first large work might be called his first opus, or the most famous work of an author or composer might be called his magnum opus, his great work. Also, we have words like operation and operative. Moving on, we have the word tempus, temporis, which means time. Another neuter noun of the third declension. Related English words such as temporal or temporary. Next, we have altitudo, altitudinous, a feminine noun of the third declension, which means height or depth. Of course, we have the English word altitude. Next, we have conjuratio, conjurationis, a feminine noun of the third declension, which means conspiracy. And this is a compound word. We have the preposition con prefixed to the word, and the part that says iura, jura, that's the Latin word for swearing. So con means together, and jura means swear. So it's people swearing together. Next, we have celeriter, an adverb that means quickly. In English, we have the word celerity. Moving on to page 41, at the top, we have enuntio. That's the verb nuntio, which means to report or announce. And it has the preposition a attached to the front. That's a or ex, which means out. So literally, it's to report out or speak out. We can translate it into English as disclose or report. Next, we have the verb woco, a verb of the first conjugation. The four principal parts are woco, vocare, vocavi, vocatum. And that means to call. We have related English words like vocation, vocal. Next, re woco. It's simply the verb woco with the preposition re attached to the front or prefixed to it. And it has the idea of calling back or recalling. Whenever you see re on the front of a Latin verb, it has the idea of back or again. Okay, let's move on now to 124, and let's translate these exercises, turn the recording off, and do them on your own on a separate sheet of paper. And when you're finished, turn the recording back on, and we'll go over them together. Okay, hopefully by now you've completed your homework. Let's start with number 1. Here we have sentence fragments, or just verbs to practice with. Revocabamos, enunciabamos. These are both imperfect tense. Notice the BA, which has been inserted right before the personal ending. So this first one is a form of the verb revoco, which means to recall or call back, and it's imperfect tense, first person plural. So it's going to mean something like we were recalling or we were calling back. Next, enunciabamos. That's a form of the verb enuntio. And again, this is imperfect tense, first person plural. So it means we were disclosing or we were reporting. Number 2 is next, enunciabatis. Okay, this is yet another form of the verb enuntio, and it's imperfect tense. Notice the BA placed before the personal ending. And it's second person plural. That means y'all are doing the action. So enunciabatis will say y'all were disclosing or y'all were reporting. The second part of number 2 here, pacabant, that's a form of the verb paco, which means to subdue. And here it's imperfect tense, third person plural. So pacabant will say something like they were subduing. Number 3 is next, komeyabam. Komeyabam is a form of the verb komeo, which means to come and go. We learned this one in the previous lesson on page 37. It has the idea of going back and forth. So komeyabam is first person singular. Notice the letter M there as the personal ending. So komeyabam says, I was going back and forth. Number 4 is next, portabatur, dabantur. Okay, here we have some passive forms. Portabatur is imperfect tense and passive. So we have the TUR ending as our third person singular passive ending. And then we have BA inserted right before it. So the BA tells us that it's imperfect, and the TUR tells us that it's third person singular passive. It's a form of the verb porto, which means carry. So portabatur will say he, she, or it was being carried. Dabantur is third person plural, passive voice. Notice the personal ending is NTUR, and we have BA placed right before the personal ending. And this is a form of the verb do, which means give. So dabantur says they were being given. Number 5 is next, portabas, portabaris. Both of these forms are imperfect tense. That's continuous action in past time. One is active voice and the other is passive voice. They're both second person singular, and they're both forms of porto, which means carry. So portabas means you singular were carrying. Portabaris means you singular were being carried. So they're the same, except one is active and one is passive. Number 6 is next, puerum appellabat. Okay, here we have a complete sentence, and the verb is appellabat. This is imperfect tense, third person singular. The imperfect tense is continuous action in past time. And the ending here is the letter T, so that's third person singular. And it's a form of the verb appello, which means to name someone. So appellabat says he, she, or it was naming, or he, she, or it was calling. And puerum is the direct object. That's the accusative singular form of the noun puer, which means boy. So we could translate number 6 as he, she, or it was naming the boy, or he, she, or it was calling the boy. Number 7 is next, nomen opidi erat genawa. Okay, our subject here is nomen. That's a neuter noun of the third declension, which means name. And opd is possessing it. Opd means of the town. It's genitive singular. The verb here is erat, that's imperfect tense, third person singular, and Ganawa is the name of a town. That's a predicate nominative, a predicate noun. So number 7 says, the name of the town was Geneva. Number 8 is next. Altitudo fluminis est parva. Okay, the subject here is altitudo. That's a feminine noun of the third declension. And it can mean height or depth. And fluminis is genitive singular. That's the word flumen, a third declension noun, which means river. So altitudo fluminis will say the height of the river or the depth of the river. Probably it means depth here because we're talking about a river. Est means is, and parva means small. Parva is feminine because it has to agree with altitudo, which is also feminine. Parva is what you call a predicate adjective. So number 8 says, the depth of the river is small. Number 9 is next. Helvetii cum finitimis amicitiam confirmabant. The subject here is the Helvetii. That's the tribe that lives in Helvetia. The verb is confirmabant. That's the verb confirmo, which means to strengthen or affirm. And it's imperfect tense, third person plural. So we can translate confirmabant as they were strengthening or they were affirming. Remember that the imperfect tense is continuous action in past time. So what that gives us is the Helvetii were strengthening or the Helvetii were affirming. And amicitiam is the direct object. That means friendship. Notice that it's first declension, accusative singular. And cum finitimis means with neighbors. Cum requires the ablative case, so finitimis is ablative plural. And we can throw in the word their, T-H-E-I-R, and say with their neighbors. So number 9 will say, the Helvetii were affirming friendship with their neighbors. Number 10 is next. Ariovistus amicus populi Romani appellabatur. Okay, Ariovistus is a person's name. He's one of the Gauls that we will read about. And the verb here is appellabatur. That's a form of the verb appello, which means to name someone something. And there are two things to notice here. It's imperfect tense, which is continuous action in past time, and it's passive. So the TUR ending tells us that it's third person singular passive, and the BA right before the personal ending tells us that it's imperfect tense. So Ariovistus and appellabatur together will say Ariovistus was being called or Ariovistus was being named. And what was he being named? Amicus. Amicus is our predicate here. So Ariovistus was being named friend. Populi Romani, that means of the Roman people. Both of those are genitive. So number 10 says, Ariovistus was being named friend of the Roman people. And what this means is that the Roman Senate could designate certain people as diplomatically friendly or allied with Rome. So they could give them that kind of title. Number 11 is next. Propter tempus ani non pugnabant. Okay, we start out here with a prepositional phrase, propter tempus ani. Propter means on account of, and tempus is the object of the preposition. Tempus means time, and it's accusative singular. Remember that tempus is a neuter noun of the third declension, so the nominative and accusative forms will look the same. Ani is a form of the noun annus, which means year, and it's genitive singular. It's possessing tempus. So that gives us on account of the time of year. And then the verb is pugnabant. That's a form of pugno, which means fight. It's third person plural, imperfect tense, continuous action in past time. And it's being negated by non. So it says, they were not fighting. So number 11 says, On account of the time of year, they were not fighting. Number 12, nostri ab opere revocabantur. Okay, the subject here is nostri, which means our, as in O-U-R. It doesn't have a noun with it. You might expect it to say our troops, our men, our soldiers, but none of those words is here. Instead, we just have nostri, which means our. So what this is a substantive, an adjective that is acting as a noun. So when you have a substantive, you have to throw in a word into your translation. So when we translate nostri, we'll translate it as our guys, our troops, our men, our soldiers, something like that. And the verb here is revocabantur. That's a form of the verb revoco, one of our new verbs for this lesson, which means to call back or recall. And by looking at the ending, you can tell several things. First of all, the NTUR ending tells you that it's third person plural passive voice. And the BA, which comes right before the personal ending, tells us that it's imperfect tense, which is continuous action in past time. So we can translate revocabantur as they were being recalled. So far, that gives us our men were being recalled. And then we have ab opere. That's a prepositional phrase. Ab is the preposition, which means from, and it takes the ablative case. Opere is ablative singular. That's one of our new nouns for this lesson, opus, operus, a neuter noun of the third declension. So opere would be ablative singular. So ab opere would mean something like from the work or from the fortification. Since we're talking about a military context here, we can translate ab opere as from the fortification. So number 12 will say, our men were being recalled from the fortification. Number 13 is next. Multa genera hominum erant in Gallia. Multa genera means many races or many tribes. Genera is the nominative plural form of genus, which is a neuter noun of the third declension. Remember that all neuter nouns take a nominative plural ending of a. So genera is nominative plural, and it's being possessed by hominum. That's genitive plural, and it means of the men. The noun there is homo hominis. So multa genera hominum says many races of men or many tribes of men. The verb here is erant. That's a verb of being. It means they were. It's imperfect tense. And in Gallia is a prepositional phrase, which means in Gaul. So number 13 says, many tribes of men were in Gaul. Number 14 is next. Helvetii oppidum celeriter expugnabant. Okay, the subject is Helvetii. That's nominative plural. The verb is expugnabant. That's a form of the verb expugno, which means things like to take by storm or to capture. And looking at the ending, we can tell that it's third person plural and that it's imperfect tense. So what we have so far is the Helvetii were capturing, or the Helvetii were taking by storm. And the direct object is oppidum. That means town. That's accusative singular. Celeriter means quickly. So number 14 says the Helvetii were capturing the town quickly. Number 15 is next. Conjurationem Helvetiis enuntiabat. As we look around for a subject, we can't use conjurationem because that's accusative. We can't use Helvetiis because that's either ablative plural or dative plural. So we need to use the pronoun that's included in with enuntiabat, the verb. So enuntiabat is a form of enuntio, one of our new verbs for this lesson, which means to disclose or report, and it's imperfect tense, third person singular, so we can translate it as he, she, or it was disclosing, or he, she, or it was reporting. And the direct object here is conjurationem. So he, she, or it was reporting the conspiracy. That's what conjurationem means. Finally, we have helvetiis. Helvetiis is dative plural. And what have I said many times that the dative case does? The dative case shows the recipient or beneficiary in a sentence. So here, the helvetii are the ones to whom it's being announced or reported. So number 15 says, he, she, or it was reporting the conspiracy to the helvetii. Number 16 is next. Helvetia contenetur flumine reno, qui agrum helvetium a Germanis dividit. Okay, the subject here is Helvetia. That's the place known as Helvetia, the country, you might say. Today it's called Switzerland, but in ancient Roman times it was called Helvetia. And the verb here is contenetur. That's a form of the verb conteneo, which means to bound or hem in. So it means bound in the sense of having boundaries. Something creates a boundary. And so this is third person singular, present tense, and passive. So contenetur means he, she, or it is bounded or is hemmed in. Okay, so Helvetia is bounded or Helvetia is hemmed in. And then we have an ablative of means, flumine, by the river. Okay, and we have the name of the river, Rheno. That's the Rhine River. Remember that the Rhine River is famous for being a natural boundary between German territory and what is today French territory. To the ancient Romans, once you cross over the Rhine, you're in German territory. So that was kind of a big deal. So the first part of this sentence says, Helvetia is bound by the Rhine River. Now we have a relative clause, which is going to tell us more information about the Rhine River. So we have the word qui here, which is a relative pronoun. And how this will work is like this. It will say, Helvetia is bound by the Rhine River, which does this and does that. Okay, so qui gives us the word which, and then we get a new sentence that tells us more about the Rhine River. Okay, so the Rhine River, which blah, 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 which does this and does that. Okay, and this new sentence here, starting with the word qui, is what we call a relative clause. Okay, a relative clause starts with a relative pronoun. So everything from qui to the end of the sentence is called a relative clause. And we'll learn more about relative clauses in upcoming lessons. But for now, let's just translate this relative clause here. Again, qui means which, and that's the subject of the relative clause. The verb of the relative clause is dividit. That's a form of the verb divido, which means to divide, and it's third person singular. So what we have so far is Helvetia is bound by the Rhine River, which divides. Okay, so this relative clause is telling us more information about the Rhine River. So far, it's telling us that it divides something. Okay, what's it dividing? The agrum Helvetium. Okay, agrum is a form of the noun ager, which is a second declension noun. It's masculine. Remember that ager is one of those nouns that changes stem. The nominative singular is ager, but the genitive stem is agr. You lose the e in the genitive stem. So here the accusative singular form is agrum. So what that gives us so far is which divides the agrum. And how will we translate agrum? Agrum can mean field, but it can also mean land or territory, or it can even mean country. So you have some flexibility in how you can translate it, why don't we translate it as land? And we have a first and second declension adjective modifying agrum. If you look at footnote number 2, you'll see that this adjective, Helvetius, Helvetia, Helvetium, it's a first and second declension adjective that means related to the country of Helvetia. So we'll translate it into English as Helvetian. So agrum Helvetium will mean Helvetian land or Helvetian territory. Okay, so far that gives us Helvetia is bound by the Rhine River, which divides Helvetian land. And then finally we have a Germanis, from the Germans. A is a preposition which can also be spelled ab, ab. Here, the next word starts with a consonant, so we get the spelling that does not include the B, just a. So a Germanis. Germanis is ablative plural because a and ab require the ablative case. So number 16 as a whole says, Helvetia is bound by the Rhine River, which divides Helvetian land from the Germans. Okay, you've gained lots of new knowledge in this lesson. Time now to take the knowledge that you've learned and begin to apply it to spoken Latin. One way you can do that is to take your vocabulary list and start to practice with each word. Another thing you could do is use the translation exercises as a way to give yourself ideas of things you could say. You could take an entire exercise or just a fragment of one. You could change the verb around, change the subject, change the direct object. So the idea here is to say things in Latin without looking at printed words. If you're really having a hard time with this, you could simply start by memorizing an existing exercise. You could just memorize it and say it over and over again with your eyes closed until you can see the action happening in your mind while you say the words. That'll be a good way to get you speaking the language, to get you saying things. Remember, the idea here is to develop a direct connection between the Latin words and the thoughts and feelings that they have associated with them. When you learn a new Latin word, don't just learn an English word to view as its English equivalent, because if you do that, what happens is you think of the Latin word, then you have to think of the English word that it means, and then the English word gives you the thought or the feeling associated with it. So that's a two-step process. Instead, when you begin to speak the language and make up sentences and say things, you begin to develop a direct connection from the Latin words to the thoughts or ideas that go with them. So you cut out the middleman of the English word. You don't need the English word as an intermediary anymore. So when you say things over and over and over in Latin, you start to associate the feelings of the Latin words directly with the Latin words. And that makes a more intimate, more direct connection with the language. So before we go, I'll give you a few quick ideas here of things you could say. Looking at our vocabulary list, we have the word flumen, which means river. You could say, est flumen, there is a river. You could say, video flumen, I see the river. You could say, video flumen Rhenum, I see the river Rhine. You could say, ripa fluminis, the bank of a river, using the genitive there. Remember, flumen is neuter, so the nominative and accusative forms will be the same. So I see the rivers would be video flumina. Nomen means name. You could say nomen viri, the name of the man. Genus generis, you could say pugnamus genera, we are fighting the tribes. In the right-hand column, you have conjugatio. If you want to say you're announcing the conspiracy, you could say nuntio conjurationem. You could say nuntiamus conjurationem. We are announcing the conspiracy. You could have a dative noun saying who you're announcing it to. nuntiamus congregationem Romanis. We are announcing the conspiracy to the Romans. Okay, so those are just a few quick ideas of things you could say. Take the verbs you know and practice saying them in the different persons, first person, second person, or third person, singular and plural. You can even practice with the passive endings. Take the different nouns you know and use the different cases. Just make up all kinds of sentences so you're practicing manipulating the language in your mind without looking at the paper. And in doing so, a little bit each day, you'll make fast progress. Okay, that's it for Lesson 12. Thank you for listening. I hope this is helping you, and we'll see you next time in Lesson 13.